If the sun's hitting the ground and there's vegetation growing on the ground, you're going to see more bucks bedding in that area versus does where they seem to get, they aren't the does. I'll be honest, I really can't figure out doe bedding. And I think it's because there's so many of them. They can really just pick an area where they have good visibility and they're not super concerned with the perfect wind or the perfect this or that. It's just they bed in a circle. Everyone's looking everywhere. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to spot and stalk, especially late season, like January. I'll see like, 5 or 6 does and some babies on a hillside somewhere. And I'll be like, all right, nothing's happening. I'm going to get in and try to spot and stalk them. It's like they've chosen these areas just because they're all in a circle and they're really difficult to get to. So, but from a buck perspective, if the ground is clear and you can see a long ways, the odds are, unless you're hunting your pets, you're gonna have a hard time seeing bucks in these areas. It's always, there's always understory and ground growth, and that what that means is a lack of canopy, or there's been some kind of, somebody's done a clear cut, or for some reason the trees don't grow high there and the sunlight's allowed to hit the ground. I mean, it's just, I don't even know. And again, it's something I should start cataloging as I'm doing this. I've actually thought about getting some of our pro staff doing it with me, like sending them the GPS locations of where I know like perennial bedding is for mature bucks, but getting in there and actually looking at the ground, because everywhere I go, there's always ground growth. It's like one of the biggest. We didn't even talk about it last time, but like ground growth is like one of the things where it's, if I get into an area, I've heard someone else mention on another podcast, and I wish I could. It stuck with me because I heard it and I didn't know quite what the guy was talking about. And then when I started actually getting into these areas where we have GPS data, it made sense for me. But I believe the phrase he used was like, if I'm in the pretty woods, I basically know I'm not going to see any deer. Like if it looks nice, and I don't remember who this was, but it was like, if I feel good and I have a lot of sight, if I have a lot of visibility and I can see a long ways and it's very pretty and there's leaves all over the ground and stuff, he's like, I know I'm not seeing any bucks in it. I maybe will see some does. And that seems to be like, again, one of those rules that is true, is when I get into these areas where bucks are spending a lot of their daylight hours, it's the sunlight's hitting the ground, there's things growing up from the ground. There's a lot of cover and food for them, and they're on an edge of that in one way or another.
So this is an example of what I call like the green carpet effect, where when you look at a map on some pines, and it basically looks like a green carpet. There's nothing there, you can't see gaps through the canopy or anything, and you come out here and it is a barren, buckless, deerless wasteland. There's just nothing in there for a deer. That's not to say that you might not see a deer coming through here every once in a while, but there's just nothing in here to draw them. There's no food, there's no cover, and there's no water. It's wide open underneath. The pines are thick enough in the canopy that they're blocking all the sunlight, so there's no sunlight getting down to the forest floor. So all you get is very shade-tolerant species, like that little cedar down there, and these poplars and everything are starting to come up. You have like these fast-growing hardwoods. You're not going to have any oaks or anything like that coming up in here. And also, there's nothing really on the ground for them to eat either. There's not enough sunlight for a bunch of honeysuckle or anything. So you're basically left with pine straw and moss. And this is something you want to avoid. It can be tempting to hunt it because it's open and you're sitting here with a rifle and you can see all the way across this valley, but there's not really much to draw a deer in here. Maybe during the rut a buck might happen to run a doe through a saddle that pops out into this stuff, but that's really about the only time I could picture seeing a deer in here. But now we're going to go to some good pines with good cover and good food. So here's an example of some good pines. These don't have the carpet effect when you look at it on the map. You can actually see little gaps through the canopies, like maybe these were thinned at some point. And since you can see those gaps, sunlight is getting to the forest floor and you wind up with something like this, where you've got all these different plants in here. You've got different hardwood species, you've got young pines growing up, and you've got a ton of underbrush. Like this Baccaris hedge, this is really great for bedding. And then you've got, I don't know what these are called, but you can see how hard that's browsed. I mean, just eat up. And it's like that all through here. There's just so much food for them in here. And they're just walking through here and bedding and eating in this stuff. And if you listen to our interview with Glenn Solomon, this is exactly what Glenn hunts. He comes out and he hunts terrain features basically inside of this stuff, where he's getting way up in one of these pines where he can see down into this bedding, and the deer are hidden here, you know, for the most part, unless you're 30 feet up in a pine. So this is what you want to look for when it comes to pines. I know you can't see as far in here, but if you get up in a tree, you can see down into it, and it ends up being some really, really good hunting.